Welcome back. You're still tuned in to Salam Media. We're still coming to you live from the Results Operations Center here in Midrand. We've been speaking to party representatives, a lot of them who are just giving us reactions on what we're almost at the halfway mark of the voting district's completion. And we're getting reactions from different political parties, their representatives. And joining us right now from the IFP is Narend Singh, the chief whip. And also a member of the National Assembly of South Africa. Thank you so much for joining us and welcome to Salam Media.
Thank you, Selaelo, and assalamu alaikum to all your listeners.
I'm sure you've been looking at the numbers pretty closely. What's your impression so far? We're almost halfway through the counting of the votes. The IFP making inroads, particularly in the KZN, where in the second latter stage of yesterday you came out very 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 strong. Your impressions?
Yeah, I think thank you for having me, firstly. I think there are more areas which are strongholds that still need to come in. And we're going to see, particularly for the IFP, a major shift in the results. It's rather unfortunate that the IEC has reported these glitches because for hours on end, there was no results board. And then suddenly you move from 32% to 52%. It leaves a bad taste in one's mouth that, these things happen. And it leaves doubt, about the credibility of the systems that they've got in place. So we still hope that there will be no more glitches and that the results will come in thick and fast. We've been told that by at least this afternoon or this evening there would be 90% or 95% of the results in, and by tomorrow they could have an unofficial result announced and the official result on Sunday.
I think before we focus on the nitty-gritties, we can just focus on the commission itself. A lot has been said about how they've been running these elections. A lot of scrutiny and criticism. The IFP's position, from what you've gathered from some of your representatives at the polling station, and ultimately here at the IEC. What do you make overall of how the IEC ran this year's polls?
I think by and large they've done well. They've had their systems in place. But when you sit in your ivory towers here and you say everything is good on the ground, it's not always the case. Like you say, when you ask people on the ground, we had a number of voters. We don't know who they would have voted for. That came in there and they're either not on the scanner or they're not on the voters roll, and people were turned away for that reason, disillusioned. We had voting stations opening late. We had ballot papers not being available. We had presiding officers that didn't know their responsibilities. And, this time around in the areas that I went, I saw a number of young people, and I've got nothing against young people, but there was a plethora of young people that were in these stations. And I don't think they've had the kind of experience before. And I'm told that they get 3 or 4 days training. Now, that is certainly not enough. And that's when you get tensions on the ground between not only political parties and IC officials, but between voters themselves, and because they get frustrated and so on. So I think the IC needs to really look at a number of issues, especially the staffing, and they'll need to look at the Section 24A issue, because I don't believe that there was sufficient education on Section 24A. People didn't know. They thought they could pitch up, and because it's a national or provincial election, you can vote, anywhere, as long as you're within the province. But that was not the case. So there's a lot of work to be done there. And, I sit in Parliament. A lot of money was appropriated to the IEC for them to beef up their capacity. And these are things that they'll have to look at moving forward, the operational things rather than the broad policies that they put in place.
And I think, we can focus a bit on the numbers right now. We are at, the halfway mark. The IFP at this point, 2.62% of the national vote. You're coming in almost, sixth? Nationally, that's your ranking. A bit of a decline if you look at the 2019 elections. At this point, you're sitting at 3.38. Just paint a picture for us. What's going through your mind? It's no longer early days, as we've always been saying.
Yeah, halfway down. Yeah, I feel pretty comfortable that we'll go up another point, 1.5, which will bring us to at least 4% or more than 4%. So you're right, we can't say it's early days, but if you look at KwaZulu-Natal in particular, there's still a number of areas that have not been captured, and we're hoping that that will push us up. But I think if I don't say that we are disappointed so far, then I will be lying to myself and everybody else. I can't understand why, because we put in a lot of effort. Uh, and we just don't know where those votes went. And I'm not saying it went to the MK, because the MK has taken a lot of votes from the ANC and the EFF. They could have taken some of our votes. And in KwaZulu-Natal, there's always this traditional issue. And in 2004, when Jacob Zuma became deputy president, he had an influence as well on the people, of course. So that kind of influence might have reared its head again. And that's why we see the kind of results we got. But we're still hopeful, and I think KwaZulu-Natal in particular will be a coalition government. I can't see MK at this stage getting 50% plus one. So it'd be interesting to see how coalitions work out there in KwaZulu-Natal, and obviously nationally, because nationally they are third or fourth, I think.
The third. Speaking of, coalitions, the IFP was part of the multi-party charter. Known as the Moonshot Pact, affectionately. Was there, meetings? What was the latest engagements between members? Looking at the numbers, I'm sure by now it looks highly unlikely that your the plan that you have had in having the multi-party charter, organized. Is there a re-strategizing of the Moonshot Pact, and what you guys see yourself playing a different role in this year's elections?
Well, I think the MPC will have to meet first, probably later this afternoon or evening, to decide what they would like to do, whether they would like to move in as a block. You could have a block of MPC people saying we've got X percentage of the vote, and any other party that wants to negotiate, you negotiate with the block. Or if there are parties within the block that say that they don't want to negotiate with anybody other than within the MPC, and individual parties could do whatever they want to do. Those are decisions, I think, the fundamental, in principle decisions that need to be taken, first, before parties start talking to others. I mean, we've had approaches already, but we don't want to take it further than them being approaches until such time that the multi-party charter can get together and decide.
And maybe if we could focus just on the KZN itself, a traditional stronghold base for the IFP for a very, very long time. It looks like in this year's election, you might have to play the role of kingmaker. Are you starting to consider your options, looking at the MK, the ANC, who's going to be trying to woo the IFP to try and get that 50+1, and possibly even having the province being run as a coalition? Your thoughts on the KZN?
Yeah, it's going to be that way, and like I said earlier, we are being approached by different parties, but we are not saying anything. We're not committing ourselves to anything at this stage of the game, because coalitions is not only about just getting into power with anybody so that you can be in government. It's about ensuring that the partners that you align with are on a common. They have a common view about sorting out unemployment. Growing the economy, getting our SOEs right. So there are certain fundamentals that they all need to agree on. And if parties can agree on those fundamentals and how they're going to implement, changes in those areas, then I think that will be the starting point for the talks. But also, we believe that it shouldn't only be about the executive. It should also be about the legislatures, where at the legislature level, whether it's at the provincial legislature or national parliaments, you should be sharing positions in the legislature. You should be sharing your speakers, deputy speakers, chair of committees. You should be sharing your chairpersons of committees. At the moment, National Assembly, we've only got one opposition chairperson, and that's from the IFP, it's from Kuleko Tlengwa. And I think that doesn't all go well for parliamentary democracy. and there's going to be more checks and balances and accountability. So we need to look at the kind of arrangement that would be in the executive and also in parliament as well. And also when you look at international postings and so on and so forth, I mean, there has to be meeting of minds in all of those arenas, not just, okay, you want to be president and we'll vote for you, so you're president, and then that's the end of the story. So we'll have to look at it holistically.
I know it's still probably early days when it comes to the conversation of coalitions, but what would be the key, I want to say, demands that the IFP would have before they get into partnership? The non-negotiables,
Yeah, I think
essentially.
policies and plans to grow the economy.
Mm.
We cannot survive in the way that we've been doing for the last 30 years. We cannot have unemployment rates at the rate it's. And I think a number of unemployed people would have voted for MK this time around because they realized that government has not been able to, promise or keep up to their promises. So if we continue ignoring growing the economy, attracting investors, getting our infrastructure, basic infrastructure right in our country, excuse me, getting our health services right in our country, then, in 5 years' time, we'll come to another election and you'll find the same problems. And the whole idea of a coalition government is to make sure we deal with those problems because the government that was in charge could not deal with them adequately. Perhaps they need help. And this is the time when we need to and see how we take things forward.
You mentioned that a lot of the unemployed people, particularly in the KZN, would have voted for the MK, and we know there's obviously historic ties between the IFP and the former President Jacob Zuma, and former leader of the IFP, Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi. Would that maybe play at the back of your minds and saying, maybe see first preference, top of the list, MK, maybe party that you'd be willing to work with?
Look, it could be an influencing factor, but I believe it's always better to have arrangements at different levels of government with the same partners. Although experience shows us that in countries that I've been to, looking at coalitions, you may find at a national, in Germany, for example, you may find at a national level there are X, Y, and Z parties that come together, but at a state level, you'll find parties who are in opposition to each other at a national level work together to form government. So, there's different dynamics here, but at the end of the day, MK must also show their ability to want to govern the country properly. It's one thing winning an election, and new kids on the block generally, do well. EFF did very well in the past. They came up with certain promises, which they couldn't virtually keep to the electorate. So now going forward, you want to work with a party that's serious about governance, serious about resolving issues in the country, and not political parties or leaders that may have have problems with each other, and they're doing this more out of spite rather than doing it out of genuineness to develop the country and develop its people. I mean, as South Africa is a gateway to Africa, but there are other African countries ahead of us now in terms of economy and trade with the rest of the world, and we need to start gaining back our number one place, and working as a collective is going to do that.
Have you made any kind of engagements yet with the leadership of the MK? If yes, how have you found them? 6 months into politics, do you feel that there's an understanding of how things are supposed to be going? Have you met the MK? What do you make of
No,
them?
we haven't had any formal talks with anybody in the run up to the election. But I was told by another news agency earlier on that when they interviewed the daughter of Jacob Zuma, I mean, you might have seen this, and they asked her who they would work with, and they ruled out some parties.
ANC.
Yeah.
ANC. She said we also spoke to her here.
Oh, did you?
Yeah,
Good.
she said the ANC is not a black progressive party, and they're a definite no, and that obviously puts the IFP as the front runners in that conversation, because right now it looks as good as confirmed. The IFP, MK, It's a love story written in the stars.
Yeah, well, I think we'll wait and see how it goes, because what happens at provinces also could be different from what happens at national government.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there should be an understanding between the parties that you don't have to have the same kind of formula like in Germany and others. Ideally, yes, but perhaps provinces have their own dynamics that they need to deal with, and they choose their own leadership there.
All right.
But I think by later tonight or tomorrow morning, most political parties should be able to tell you which way they're going. If they want to be part of government, if they don't want to be part of government, just go back as opposition and continue in that role. So I think tomorrow you'll get a much clearer picture.
As someone that's actively involved in politics and engaging with different political parties and being at the heart of South Africa's political landscape, do you feel RC 30 years into it is ready for coalition government, whether provincial or national government?
We're not ready for it. Look at this 5 years of it. It's going to be a very shaky kind of marriage. We know what's happening at local government level. We've seen that maybe one member of a 200-seater council becomes the mayor, and you wonder how. And you look at the dynamics there. It's more positioning yourself for power rather than looking at the interests of the people. So it hasn't been a good experience. Excuse me. In most instances at local government, we've governed before as not coalitions but as a government of national unity, and it worked pretty well. It worked pretty well until the ANC decided no, they don't want to have any of that, and they wanted to rule on their own, and now they're paying the price for that. So sort of government of national unity works. We must base whatever relationship we have and not call it coalitions, call it swear word, than coalitions at this moment in time. Because coalitions give you a different connotation. Coalitions sometimes mean that you're co-opted, and that's not the case. Coalitions mean you still preserve your own identity, but you work for common good. But over time, you find some coalition partners get co-opted by the bigger parties. So I think these are lessons that we'll all have to learn as we move forward, but we don't have time. We don't have time, because if there are coalition governments within the matter of the next 6 months, they must hit the ground running. And service delivery must be the focus and nothing else. But it's going to be interesting times.
All right, interesting times indeed. I think we're going to leave it there, Mr. Singh. Good luck with the rest of the 50% of the votes. I really, really appreciate you joining us.
Thank you. God bless.
Mr. Narend Singh there, coming from the IFP, just giving us the latest when it comes to how the IFP is seeing their results. Also discussing a bit on the KZN and government of national unity instead of coalitions. That's how he wants it to be coined. I think it's going to be interesting times, and the role that the IFP is going to be playing is going to be a really important one indeed. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll be wrapping up this edition of News and Views.